Hi, welcome to a little class on the elements of kitchen witchery. I called it that because we are going to talk about how the elements, earth, air, fire, and water, affect the foods that you eat and prepare, and how you can use those to create a little bit of spell work in your cooking. Now, this information comes from a book that I wrote called Goddess in the Kitchen. It's available exclusively on Amazon.com. And I will link that down below in the description. Also, I've included some pretty extensive handouts that go deeper into the idea of elemental magic with cooking. And you can download those from the link in the description as well. Now, this book is newly updated. This is the second edition. It came out in 2024. And I doubled the amount of text, doubled the amount of recipes in there, and added some wonderful pictures. So when you read this book, not only is it going to talk extensively about kitchen witchery in general, it's also going to have my favorite recipes that that I have prepared for my family over the past 50 years or so. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about how we would use cooking in spell work. Now, of course, everything is energy, and anything with the word witchery in it is going to involve, to some degree, the movement and the manipulation of energy. Now, all things have some sort of energy to them, and food is no exception. Now, when I talk about food, I want to be very clear that I'm talking about what we would call real food, not frankenfood or lab-created food. I also am not talking about highly processed food, so we're not going to discuss the elemental qualities of Ritz crackers. We're talking about foods that nature provides to us. Now, that doesn't exclude cooking, although certainly the way that you cook your food is going to change that energy signature of the food to some degree. Now, if you cut up your vegetables, that's not going to change the energy signature of those vegetables. It will, however, shift slightly when you harvest those vegetables because you're cutting the food off from its energy source. But it will still maintain the energies of that food. Now, let's say we take it further and we freeze that food. That's then going to preserve a good bit of the energy signature, but some of it will be lost the longer it stays in the freezer. If you're canning food, almost invariably when you can food, there is a cooking process or a heating or blanching process that goes along with it. And that is going to start to diminish that energy signature. It doesn't mean the food no longer has value as far as energetically influencing your meal, but it does mean it's going to be less than if it was raw and harvested directly from the garden. In our modern life, we just have to accept the fact that a lot of our foods will have a diminished energy signature. However, that energy is still there to varying degrees. The more processed and the more cooked and stewed the food is, the more that energy signature is going to start to diminish and also to meld into other energy signatures that might be present in that meal. So when we talk about elements, we're talking about earth, air, fire, and water, and how we divide foods into those categories. But first, I want to talk about another consideration that you're going to make as soon as you're deciding what food to prepare for a specific purpose. Now, this is presuming you're going into your kitchen witchery project with an idea of an outcome. You're wanting to create some kind of outwork through the spell work you're going to do with the food that you're creating and serving. And the first thing you want to ask is, do I want to wake something up or do I want to put it to sleep? Because most food choices will do one of the other. It will be relaxing, it'll be comfort food, it'll be calmly nourishing, or it's going to be invigorating, it's going to be spicy, it's going to wake you up and motivate you. Now, when we think about putting something to sleep, calming it down, or we think about waking it up and getting it motivated and moving, We then can move into that discussion about those 4 elements and how they apply to food. So let's get into it a little bit. Now, you're welcome to download those handouts and follow along, but there's a lot more in the handouts that I'm going to be talking about in this itty bitty little video class. This is typically a 2-hour class. So think about earth foods, and I'll bet you already have an idea of what that's going to look like. Earth foods walked the earth at some time. So this is talking about our meats of all kinds. We also have the food that grew in the ground, and that's going to be our tubers, our root vegetables, anything that grew below the surface. Now, when we talk about whether something's above ground or below ground, of course, all plants have roots and different levels of involvement into the ground, but we're talking about what is the food that goes into your mouth? What part of that plant are you eating? And that's going to tell you a lot about the assignment of the element to that particular food. So when we think about a potato, it's growing right down there in the earth. We're usually not eating the greens that are very prolific up above ground. We're going to eat those potatoes that are underneath. So that's going to be classified as an earth veggie. Carrots, lots of greenery going on there, but down below is where our focus is. We're looking at that carrot that's growing below the surface. So meats and foods that grow down in the dirt will be your earth foods. Let's go to air next. Air, when we think about the qualities that, well, we'll get to that in a second. I'm going to jump train here. I'm going to stay back with where I was. With air vegetables, we're looking for foods that blow in the wind. And that's why I specifically say veggies, because most often it's going to be vegetables that do this. Now, one thing I want to add on to meat and earth foods would be nuts, because nuts typically grow on trees, and trees grow in the earth. And even though you're not putting tree into your mouth, that walnut was supposed to create a tree. Therefore, it's considered an earth food. So I just want to throw that little PS in there before we go on to air. Air foods blow in the wind. And I mean the part of the food that you eat will blow in the wind. An example of this would be wheat or any of your grains, because that blows in the wind. An exception might be corn, because the part of the corn that you would eat is not the part that blows in the wind. So we want to look at the movement. It's going to be something that if a gale force wind came through this garden, it's going to be moving and flowing, and that's the part that we would put into our body. So that's air foods. Fire foods motivate us. They're very stimulating, and they are very spicy, very caffeinated, such as chocolates, and the foods that will get things moving. So think about that in terms of fire food. Things like cinnamon and cloves and chilies would be another form of fire food. Lastly, we've got the water foods. Water foods are the ones that if you bite into it, it's going to run down your mouth. You're going to have a big explosion of juice. And that would be things like your fruits and melons and tomatoes. Anything that's going to be super, super juicy when you eat it is going to be a water food. Now, another addition to the water foods would be foods that have a water base, like a soup or some of the heavier drinks that you might serve. If it's got a lot of water to it, then we're looking at a water food. So that's your categorization there as far as whether it's earth, air, fire, water. And that's going to be relevant to, are we waking something up or are we putting it to sleep? So let's talk about what each of those elements will do. Now, this is a similar correspondence list of what you're going to learn if you are being taught how to invoke elements into your circle. You're going to have specific attributes of each of those 4 elements that contributes positively to the energy of your circle. And in this case, contributes to the energy of the meal that you're creating. So earth foods, as you can imagine, are grounding. They're calming. They are nurture foods. They're going to make you feel more here. They're going to get you back down into your body. Earth foods also are good for prosperity and feeling safe, and really that root chakra feeling of being in your body and being comfortable with who you are. Air foods are for qualities such as academic learning, wisdom, overall intelligence, using your brain for things. So rather than working with feeling, we're working with intellect. Also, it's got to do with new beginnings, the winds of change that blow, and sparking something new, creating something new and blowing away the old. When we look at fire, we're talking about creativity. We're talking about sexuality. We're talking about passions, such as your hobbies or your things that you just love to do, creating some sort of passionate response in somebody or an enthusiastic response. Also, it's about motivation, getting things moving. So in that case, we're waking something up. We're not going to feed somebody a fire food if we're trying to put a situation to sleep. We're going to feed a fire food if we want to motivate them and get them moving. And then we go to water. As you can imagine, water foods tend to be very calming. Water foods are all about exploring intuition and emotion, the appropriate use of emotion, and the flow of things, the fluidity and the easy movement of situations. So those are your basic sort of energies about the 4 elements. You can research this extensively online, probably pretty safely. It's wonderful about witchcraft and spell work that there are so many things that you're probably not going to get in trouble with if you research it online, because it's sort of agreed upon consensus. If we look at things like, what do the stones mean? What are the color correspondence? What does this herb do? It's all going to be pretty similar. So you don't have to go at it from a position of fear if you're researching this. So how do we put all of that information together into Kitchen Witchery? What we're going to do is first make our determination. I want to put something to sleep or I want to wake it up. Now, let's say I want my boss to give me a promotion and a raise. And so I've invited my boss over to have dinner with me. Now, I don't want to put my boss to sleep. I want to motivate and inspire my boss to give me that raise, to feel some sort of kinship with me, and appreciate who I am, what I do, what I offer, and be motivated to promote me. So we're using a lot of action words there, which means we're going to have a fire element to whatever we're serving. We're also trying to manipulate and steer the way that our boss is thinking, because it's going to be an intellectual decision usually of who to promote and who to hire. So we would want to incorporate an air food with that meal and really put the push of air and fire. So what I would make is chili and cornbread, both of which are kind of air food and a spicy food. We could also just have a type of bread that comes with the chili, which would be even a bread bowl, because that would be even more of an air food. We mentioned how corn is kind of iffy. Corn, I would actually call more of a water food. But once we get it into the grain that we're making, it has become something that would just blow away. So it depends on how we translate. So that's the way that you would choose your food based on what your goal is. Now, let's say I want to make a food because I'm having my young adult daughter over for dinner, and she's just been frantic. She's had a lot of anxiety. She's feeling really antsy, and she just needs some mom time. So what I'm going to want to offer her will be calming foods. I don't want to put her to sleep, but I certainly want to calm and ground her. This means that I'm going to focus on earth foods and water foods. I want her to feel the flow of things. If she's feeling really anxious, I want her to understand intuitively and get the feel that things are transient, things pass, everything flows. And I want her to feel grounded and good in her own body. So I'm going to serve her some type of meat. I'm going to serve her maybe a chicken soup because that's going to have a water element to it, and it's also going to have the meat element to it. So we want to look at how this food is going to make somebody feel or what response it's going to evoke in them. We also want to think about the inherent energies that are in the element that this food would represent. So that's how I do it. You can learn so much more in that book, Goddess in the Kitchen, but also in the handouts that I have linked in the description before. I hope this was helpful for you. This is really just scratching the little surface of kitchen witchery. There is so much more to explore, and this is a tiny portion of it. I hope you enjoyed the class. Bye, everybody.